guys, we're going to be doing something a little bit different this week. I'm going to be telling you Ginger's story. So if you don't know, if you haven't watched my vlogs before, Ginger is my horse and I've had him for 9 years now, and he's had quite an exciting life. He's done quite a lot in his time. So yes, I wanted to talk you through his life today and properly introduce you to him. A few of you asked for me, I've asked questions before about him and asked for me to sort of describe Ginger's story a little bit, so here it is. One thing I will say before I start is I apologise for the quality of some of the video clips in this. They were filmed with a very old camera phone and I used Windows Movie Maker to edit a lot of my videos back in the day, and that used to ruin the quality of pretty much everything I ever did. So I do apologise about that, you'll just have to bear with it. Ginger's life began when he was born on the 25th of April 2003. He was out of a mare called Reams of Verse and by the stallion Desis. He was born at Judmonte Farms in Kentucky and he was bred by Prince Khalid Abdullah. The day Ginger was born, he was sold for $1 million. He wasn't born with the name Ginger, that's the name that I gave him. His full name is General Knowledge, and for the first couple of years of owning him we always called him General because that was just what his name was shortened to, but over time we gave him the nickname Gingerbread Man and that got shortened to Ginger. He flew to France when he was 11 months old, and when he got a little bit older that's when he started his training to become a racehorse. He ran a few races in France before being sold to England. Here in the UK he ran a few more races before he retired at 5 years old.
And racing, they came out in a good line, so a scrap for the early lead, won by General Knowledge. Racing halfway along the back straight inside the final 6 furlongs, General Knowledge has raced off in front and leads by 6 lengths. 3 furlongs left as they approach the straight. General Knowledge still scorching along in front. Pop Music is being hard driven second. Torrance is making an effort now, goes second to the outside, but suddenly General Knowledge is kicked again as they approach the straight with 2.5 furlongs to go. Torrance goes off in pursuit second. Coup d'etat's trying to make ground then on the outside of Pop Music as they head towards the final furlong and a half. General Knowledge is in front. Torrance is trying to close him down, but hard driven to do so. 6 lengths to Coup d'etat, and General Knowledge approaches the furlong pole with a 3-length lead, but it's diminishing. Torrance is coming after him now, 200 yards to go. General Knowledge hanging on by a couple of lengths. Torrance is closing inch by inch, but the post is coming up pretty quickly here, but it comes quickly enough for General Knowledge.
He didn't retire due to any injury or physical problem. It was a mental block that he had. He decided he no longer wanted to run in races anymore, which to be honest I can't blame him for. Unfortunately, if you're a horse that no longer wants to run, you're not a lot of good to the racing world, and Ginger found himself for sale at an auction not long after he retired. Thankfully, a really kind-hearted lady saw him and fell in love with him and rescued him from going off to slaughter. His life then changed quite dramatically when he went to a Western horsemanship trainer, and he had him for 4 months before advertising him for sale. That's when I found him. In 2009 he was 6 years old and he came to live with us. I was in love with Ginger from the moment I laid eyes on him, and I'm going to tell you more about that story a bit later. The first couple of months were absolutely great. He was so easy, he was such a sweet horse, really fun to ride, really fun to do things with, but things weren't always quite so simple. So Ginger had a very full-on life before he came to me, and when he was with the Western trainer he was being ridden every single day. He really was working hard, and when he came to me I was still at school, so I was only riding a couple of times a week, maybe at the weekends, maybe once or twice in the evenings, but really not a lot. And I think what happened is Ginger kind of woke up. I began to have a few problems with him just because he had so much energy. I'm not really sure what I was expecting, having bought an ex-racehorse. But we kind of managed it okay. There was just certain days that I wasn't able to ride him. Sometimes I would get on him and I would get straight back off again because he just wasn't in the right frame of mind to be ridden. I was doing natural horsemanship with him from day one, but I didn't really know a lot about what I was doing. I was kind of just following YouTube videos and things that people were telling me. I couldn't really afford to have lessons or anything like that at the time, so we were kind of bumbling through it with our eyes closed, hoping to kind of get somewhere with it. Unfortunately, as time went on, my lack of knowledge and experience, coupled with Ginger's background and his youth and his energy, really didn't make the best match. and we began to have some serious problems. He developed some fairly serious behavioural problems while being ridden, and that caused an awful lot of heartache and trouble for both of us. I fell off him a few times, and it eventually got to the point where every single time I would ride him, we would have an argument. It was not going well, we weren't getting on whatsoever, and I was losing my confidence day by day. After a year of having him, I decided that I wasn't good enough for him. I'd completely taken on the wrong horse, and I actually advertised him for sale. I think that was probably one of the lowest points in my life, because I really adored this horse. I even got to the point where someone was coming to see him, and I rang them up the day before and I said, I'm really sorry. I said, you can't come and see him. I've decided I'm not going to sell him. I could not get rid of that horse. He was just too special to me. There was something keeping him there with me, and I knew I had to keep trying. I found out about a Pirelli natural horsemanship instructor who was coming to the area to do some lessons, and I decided to use my savings to book a 2-hour lesson with her as kind of a last chance resort. And I thought, if I don't get anywhere in that lesson, then I will give up on the idea of riding him and just play on the ground for the rest of his life. The instructor came out, her name was Elaine, and she was absolutely amazing. That lesson was a real turning point in my life. Elaine came out, she gave me some real fantastic pointers, gave me a step-by-step programme to work with him and how to get back to riding him and actually enjoying our partnership. I really realised that day how many things I'd been getting wrong without knowing it, and that was definitely the turning point for us. The techniques that Elaine showed me in that lesson were really helpful for me to go away and actually work with him and actually improve on things. But the really huge thing that she taught me was to really listen to him and really understand why he behaved in the way he did. For me, over the next few weeks and months, I really changed, and I think that is around the time when I decided that I wanted to do this for a living. I wanted to help horses and help people, because I had been in that really low place that I know a lot of people still get themselves into, and I knew now there was a way out of it. As I worked with Ginger and really put a lot of time into really understanding him and listening to him, I realised that a lot of the problems that we were having were because he is my complete mirror. We are so similar, it is unbelievable. He's a very confident horse, he really loves to get out there and have fun and play, but he loses his confidence very easily. Okay, maybe not so much nowadays, but he certainly did then. And when he lost his confidence, he would go extremely introverted and really panic on the inside. And that's exactly how I am. Ginger never looked scared, and that's why I always thought it was a behavioural thing. I always thought he was being naughty, being cheeky, and actually that wasn't the case. He is a very cheeky, very naughty horse sometimes. But all of the behaviours that were causing such a problem with our relationship were actually nothing to do with confidence, they were all to do with fear. And I just hadn't even considered for a moment that he was scared. I then began to peel back the layers of him and really work out what it was that was going on, and I found out that he was absolutely petrified of being ridden, and not only being ridden, but being saddled, and even to the point where he didn't even want somebody standing around the area where the saddle was going to go. I couldn't even groom him there without him getting worried. He'd begun to really associate everything with being ridden. And that's why all these things were happening. That's why when I was grooming him, he was biting me. That's why when I was mounting him, he couldn't stand still. And then when I was actually on him and riding him, he would freeze, and then he would panic and he would come out fighting. I couldn't believe that I had missed this for so long and allowed this to happen and allowed it to get so bad. But, you know, we all have to learn somewhere. I then went through a programme of completely restarting him, and that literally went from me standing in what we call zone 3, which is the belly and back area, just standing there next to him and stroking him and letting him graze and letting him have a walk and things like that until he was calm. And then we started to introduce the numner and the saddle and then all kinds of other things before eventually I got back on him, and that process took just over a year to complete. That year was a real eye-opener for me and a huge step in our relationship, and I feel like our trust and our bond really improved in that year. That's when we really came to know each other inside out, and although it was a tough year and it felt like it went on forever, it was one of the best years in my horsey life because I learnt so much in that year, and I really felt like I developed such a deep connection with my horse. After that, things were pretty good. We had some really good riding time together. We really enjoyed each other's company again, and he became that dream horse that I knew he could be. Unfortunately, our joy was fairly short-lived when he went horrendously lame in 2012. I remember turning up to the stables and realising that he couldn't put one of his hind feet on the floor, and I was really worried. The vets began to investigate, and upon x-raying him, they found that he had a fairly serious stifle problem. You could tell from the x-ray that he had probably had an injury from when he was racing that had caused this problem. While he was still growing, it hadn't really caused a problem, but by that point he was fully grown and the joint was completely in the wrong position. The prognosis wasn't great. They said that they could operate on him and try and fix it, but then he would have had to have been box rested for a very long period of time, and it still wasn't clear whether he would actually be able to be ridden again or not. My options were to have the operation done, to box rest him for 6 months with painkillers and then reassess him afterwards, or have him put to sleep. I was absolutely gutted. I couldn't believe that my dream horse was going through this, and he had given me so much in that last year, and I knew how hard it had been for him to really get back to accepting having a rider, and now it felt like it was all over. I got a second opinion from another vet, and he suggested that I could put him on painkillers and turn him out, and rather than box rest him for 6 months, let him be out for 6 months and see how things go and see what he's like at the end of that time. I decided that that was my best option. That was the option that was going to keep him happiest. I really didn't want to have him put down at that moment. He was still a very happy horse, he was still finding himself, and box rest was never a good idea with Ginger. I didn't want to risk having the operation because I really didn't think that he'd be able to cope with the box rest full stop, but also because the chances of him coming back out of it being able to be ridden were fairly slim. After the first few months, he started to look a lot better and we started to cut down the painkillers. To our absolute surprise, at the end of the 6 months, Ginger was pretty much completely sound. They didn't re-x-ray him, but they checked him all over and they gave him the okay to do some very light work. So we started to do some bits on the ground again, getting him built back up, getting his muscle built back up, and then I was able to start riding him again, and I was so happy. I was always very careful with him, we didn't do anything too strenuous, but unfortunately our happiness didn't last. Another problem caused by him racing so young is that the vertebrae down his spine are very close together. He doesn't have kissing spines, but he has kind of the stage before it, where they're just a little bit too close together and they cause trapped nerves. After we'd been riding for a little while again after his time off, this started to cause a problem and he was getting trapped nerves near enough every single week. The chiropractor then issued him I believe it was a 4-month rest break for his back, and unfortunately within that time his stifle lost the muscle around it which we needed to keep him going, and he went lame again. Unfortunately, by the time he was sound and his back was okay, he was starting to have worries about being ridden again because he just had so much time off. I managed to get his mind back into the right place to be ridden, got back on him, and his back went. He had a couple of weeks off with that, and his stifle went. We went round and round in circles playing that ridiculous game for some time, and eventually towards the end of 2013 I made the decision to retire him completely from ridden work. It wasn't really a difficult decision by that time because I just felt like it was the best thing for him. We could still have plenty of fun on the ground. The vet had cleared him to do anything he likes on the ground as long as he's comfortable, as long as he's willing, just allow him to get on with it. But adding the weight of a rider on his back was just causing so many more problems. So I know that retiring him was definitely the right decision to make. I don't think he would still be here if I'd still been riding him. Bear in mind that 6 years ago, the vet gave me an option to have him put down because she didn't believe that he was actually going to make it much further on in life. So the fact that he's still here, he's still out playing every day, he's turned out with his mates, he's having a wonderful time, and he can do just about anything on the ground with no problems. To be honest, I think that's a complete miracle, and I'm so glad that I made the decisions that I made when I did. So I've got a couple of questions that people have asked me on my Facebook and Instagram. So the first question is, what brought Ginger into your life? So I saw his advert when I was just browsing YouTube videos of horses. I was 15, 16 years old, and I spent a lot of my Saturday afternoons just watching videos of horses really because I loved them. And I saw Ginger's video and I watched his video twice because I was just absolutely captivated by this horse. It wasn't really that much different from other videos I've been watching. It was just a man in a cowboy hat riding a Ginger thoroughbred around. He was doing a great job, but as I say, it wasn't really that different from anything else I'd been watching that afternoon. But something about him really caught my eye, and when I then opened the description box of the video, I found out that Ginger was for sale. I then begged my parents to let me go and see him. My parents really didn't want me having an ex-racehorse, but we had a look at a few others online on their adverts, and I just couldn't bring myself to want to see any other animal. I only wanted to see Ginger. So eventually we went to see him, and my mum fell in love with him as well. And a week later he was home. The question is, how long do you feel it took to notice that he had the confidence to really trust you? I believe it was when I restarted him, and I really opened up to him and let him see the real me, because I think until I allowed myself to give everything to him, he couldn't give everything to me, and I definitely think that was the turning point for us. How long have you had him for, and how old is he? So I've had Ginger for 9 years now, and he is 15. He turned 15 on the 25th of April. How did you know that you were right for each other? I think from the day I saw his advert, there was, as I say, just something about him that I really loved, and that I really felt that I needed him in my life. But then obviously when we had some bad times, I felt that changed. But yeah, again, just going back to that year when I restarted him, that was the huge thing for me, and that's when I knew that he was the right horse for me. And I do think that is something that sometimes you need to find out. I think when I see that, people have only had a horse for 6 months or a year, and then they'll say it's not the right horse for me, sometimes I feel like maybe it is, and you just need to actually find out what is the thing that's going to make that horse the right horse for you. What are you missing? There's normally something missing, and I do believe that everything happens for a reason. I believe that a horse finds its way into your life for a reason, and there's just too many reasons to even begin to say as to why he's meant to be in my life. I hope you've enjoyed this week's vlog and hearing Ginger's story. If you have any other questions about him, I would be more than happy to answer them, and I will see you next week.